Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree.
Oh, that's not to be mentioned on the podcast. Buzz, edit that out.
The Third Degree Net Podcast.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to another episode. This one numbered 284 of Third Degree, the podcast. He's got a new manager, and we want to know how he feels about it. It is English Dan Crooke. Howdy, Dan.
Hey, I had no idea what you were on about for a second, but I assume you're talking about Adrian Forbes at Texheimer FC. Very excited.
You've bested me once again, my friend. No, I was wondering how you felt about Thomas Tuchel managing your England team.
Oh, yeah, totally. Great. Awesome. Wonderful.
You dig it?
Yeah, totally. Why
Okay.
wouldn't I?
I don't know. Because
It's
he
funny.
runs hot and cold with people, his bosses, pretty quickly. I don't know.
That's fine. If he takes it to the FA, that makes me happier. It was just funny. People back home to me, well, why isn't it an English coach? Oh, yeah. Do you want Sean Dyche?
And you could have taken Buzz's Eddie Howe.
Hands off.
Hands
Nah.
off.
We're good.
All right. Well, wanting to protect his Newcastle, there he is, your hero, my hero, everybody's hero, editor, founder of thirddegree.net, and the original soccer influencer himself. It is Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
I thought you were going to ask Dan about the updates to his OnlyFans account, since that's just what he was doing last week when he was not here.
Yeah, what was that about?
Well, you told us why you couldn't do the podcast last week. You had gotten a custom request from a subscriber to your OnlyFans account, and you had to tend to it since it paid a lot of money.
Sneeze to me, I was building a computer for my wife.
Man, that is one really pervy OnlyFans account you've got going on there.
Hey, that's kind of how Buzz bought his desktop. He was watching the guy
Yeah.
build it.
I did. That was cool.
That was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah,
Except that guy had clothes on.
he did. He did, in fact, have clothes on.
That's
Yeah,
right.
but it was really hot last week.
That's true. It was hot. Yeah. I mean, you could work a pretty good sweat a really, really, really sweaty night building a computer on a webcam.
I feel like you've practiced that voice too much.
I get paid for that voice. All right, boys. Well, here we are. We're in that stupid bye week in between the next to last and last weeks of the MLS season. This means nothing. Dallas is cooked. It is interesting, I will say this week, as before we get into the game of the day, which we will play dump or keep, and talk about Trinity FC and a couple other things before we end this deal. I did want to point out that we're in that point of the year where media people start writing recaps of the season, and Matt Doyle wrote one. I also want to give a shout out to our very good friend Steve Davis, because I think, somebody in Steve's position is always a difficult position to be in, because he has a responsibility to the club. But I think Steve also has done a really, really commendable job of being professionally critical as appropriate this season. And he wrote a Substack letter this week that talked about a lot of the things that we've talked about. I thought he brought up some of his own thoughts in there that were really sharp, and I wanted to give him credit for posting that publicly.
Yeah, it was quite good. And I think it echoes a lot of the same sort of themes that we've been echoing. And Matt Doyle's thing did too. So none of what we've talked about should be really surprising, actually.
Yeah, so Matt is going through doing kind of his recap of every team individually, and he wrote one, and there were lots of things in there that were stuff that we've talked about. And I will just let everybody know, because I'm assuming he did it because he didn't ask me if he could. I'm the person he's quoting in the article about the friend who covers the team. That's a conversation. Yeah, that's the conversation between he and I. The big takeaway from that surprised me is that he refers to me as his friend. I don't know how to. I'm kind of I don't know.
Internet friend.
I guess, is that different? Maybe it is. I don't know. But if Matt Doyle calls me friend, I'm going to accept and take that. Thank you, Matt Doyle.
When I was working in my NASCAR phase one time, we were going through Kansas City, and a guy who I've known for like 20 years on the internet I would call him a friend, and he came and met me and some of my coworkers for dinner. And I had told them my friend was going to come meet us, and he showed up, and I was like, "Hey, nice to meet you." And they were like, "I thought you said he was your friend." I said, "Well, yeah, I've known him for 20 years. I just never met him in person."
He was more than your internet friend?
No, he is now. I mean, I've met him.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
you've crossed that line.
Yeah, I met him in
nowadays person. That's called Tinder.
Tinder, yeah.
Remember
OnlyFans?
Pen pal? Did either one of you ever have a pen pal?
No.
You never had a yeah, Dan, that doesn't surprise me. You're a little younger than us. No, pen pals were a thing.
Yeah.
How Buzz, I'm 50, almost 56. How old are you?
52.
All right, so I'm a few years older. When I was in elementary school, I think we tried to do like a pen pal program with somebody in another country. Where and I think we exchanged like one letter each before we got bored with it and it was done with.
Here's what I should have said, Peter, is that I'm old enough that I can't remember how old I am. I'm actually 53. Now that I think about it. I had to think about it for a second.
I got news for you, Buzz. It doesn't get better.
No, it doesn't. After I said that, I was like, wait a minute, that's not right.
It only gets worse, my friend.
Yeah, you're right. When I was in school, I knew people that had pen pals from other countries, and I think they offered a program. And I didn't go for it, but I think I remember them offering that and people doing it.
Now I'm trying to think of the last time I actually hand wrote a letter, and cards don't. And cards don't count.
Summer camp, like sending a thing to my parents, telling them like what I was doing.
Maybe I think the last thing I ever wrote was like a letter, a spiteful, I hate your guts letter to the girl that broke up with me after college, I think. And that was really long. I'm sure she showed it to all kinds of people.
Yeah.
What a moron. All right. Speaking of morons, let's talk about this particular season. Buzz, it's time for our annual game of Dump or Keep, where we go through the FC Dallas roster.
Well, before you start that, can I hit item 1 on the format for me?
Item 1 on your
it's because the crayon's green this time.
Oh, that's right. It is. Why is the crayon green this time, Buzz?
Because we're approaching Christmas holidays.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I thought you just defected to us then.
No.
In the run sheet written in green crayon today, A2025 roster problem, parentheses, ask Buzz.
Yeah.
That was the instruction that I forgot to do. Sorry, Buzz.
Yeah. So let me just really quickly say that it is super hard to actually figure out a team's salary cap, because there's multiple things that go into a salary cap number for a player. It's not only the base salary, but like the bonuses that you're going to get. It also includes like what it costs to buy the player, things like that. So like there's no published salary cap numbers. The best you can do is try and sort of ballpark it. So I sat down with I went through the salaries of every player from 22 to 24. And I looked at how much they jumped each year. And so I estimated 2025. And then I put in all the things, all the roster mechanics like TAM buy downs, DPs, all that kind of crap. The bottom line is I added it all up, and all the numbers are available for what the salary cap and such are going to be next year. And right now, depending on how accurate I got with my numbers, FC Dallas is somewhere in between $1.2 to $1.5 million over the salary cap. So and that's if you just bring everybody back. Yeah, if you just bring everybody back, they're around 1.2 to 1.5 over the cap.
Yeah, I'm glad you did this, because it dawned on me last week when I don't remember what brought this up in my head, but I was going through the roster and it dawned on me that this was going to be a problem, and you've done the math now, because they've got
to the best I could, yeah.
Yeah, because they've got Paxton's money coming back, and that's about $1 million. Everybody else's dollars are going up. And they've added Show and Ruan, although I guess those are guys that you really can't count because we don't. As we'll find out, they're not under contract.
Right. So what I did was you can see what a guy's contract has jumped from year to year to year. So you just extrapolate out the next year of it, right? You know what the DP numbers are going to be. It's up to 744 next year, 744,000. I left the things like young DP and U22 the same, which are like 200,000. I bought down everybody that needs to buy down. And so just based on that, the club basically needs to dump something like $1 million to $1.5 million in salary cap in order to get under the cap. So it's as we, the exact numbers of that, it's hard to really say. But just as we talk about this team and the build for next year, we just have to keep that back in the mind, the idea that they're going to have to dump. There's a bunch of ways you can do it, and maybe at some point we'll talk over the next couple of weeks when the team's eliminated, we'll talk about how they could do that the best way. But, for today, I thought it was important to put it out there that the team will need to take this into mind as they're making a lot of these decisions.
I've got a question for you, Buzz.
Yeah.
Did you do that on Tuesday just so that you would do some impossibly complex arithmetic on tax extension day?
No, I did do it on Tuesday, but it's not why I did it. Yeah.
Well, all right. So moving on to part 2 of this, it's time now for our annual game of dump or keep, where we run through the FC Dallas roster and kind of break down who's under contract, who has options, who's out of contract. And then kind of everybody go around and decide who we want to dump or keep. It's a pointless exercise, fun nonetheless. It's not? Okay.
All
right.
Not. No, I prepped. I've got a spreadsheet and everything. I even found out how to do the crosshair highlight in Google Sheets.
Awesome. All right. So because we can't dump or keep these, let me just go ahead and run through the people that are still under contract for 2025. And I don't know if you want to comment about any of them, Buzz, but let me just run through the list. This is per Buzz. Anis Sali. I've never seen him play a minute of soccer. Petter Musa, Martin Paz, Paxton Pomykal, Giovanni Jesus, Bernard Kamungo, Paul Areola, Jesus Ferreira, Alan Velasco, Sebastian Leggett, Marco Farfan. Oh, Show is under contract next year. Okay.
Through June.
You remember he has a loan that runs through the middle of the season. So if there probably is an out clause in it if they felt they needed to, but technically he's under contract till middle of next year.
And when I thought Anis Sali was obscure, here's a name I don't even know who this person is. Alejandro Uzura.
Yep. He's a homegrown. He's, 17, 18 years old.
Giant question mark over my head. Carl Sante, Nolan Norris, Tariq Scott, and Thomas Pondeka. Those players are all under contract.
Just a quick, since you brought it up on Ali Uzura, is that he was, for my money, he was the best player in Matthew Corcoran's class after Matthew Corcoran left. He became like the midfield general of that team. He was the first homegrown from that group signed, and I thought it was quite appropriate that he be signed.
Has he been playing with North Texas?
Yes.
Starting?
He's gotten injured a couple of times over the last season and a half. It's kind of held him back a little bit. Earlier this year, he was actually doing really well and getting a lot of playing time, and then he got hurt again. So, the bottom line for a kid like that is like, if you can't stay healthy, it's going to be very difficult to make it. But he's going to have to find a way to stay healthy. So, but he is talented.
He's an 8, a 6, a 10. What is he?
He's a 6'8" combo.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a lot of those around here, but yeah.
On the Matthew Corcoran scale, where does he fall?
Oh, he's not as good as that, but he's pretty good. He's close. He could be a if he were to progress, you could put him in the same regions as Paxton Delgado, or maybe not quite as good as Paxton, but you never know. You never know until a kid actually taps out where he's going to stop. So he's definitely got some talent, and he's a little taller than he's tall and thin, which is why I think he gets hurt. He gets banged up.
Okay. All right, so let's run through. Let's start with the players that are out of contract, because these are 3 known names, and we can go from there. And I think this is going to be the one that's going to cause the most conversation. Asir Alaramendi.
You're kind of almost David Moisney. Alaramendi.
All right, so Alaramendi is the first person out of contract.
Right.
How do you want to do this, Buzz?
Well, let's just take turns asking me first and then Dan first. And then you could throw in 2, of course.
Okay.
I guess I'll go first on this one. I think this is a pretty simple no-brainer. The age is obviously pretty high. He'll be 35 in March. But, from game to game, when he's healthy, he often is Dallas's best player this all season at 34. You can't invest in him a long term, and you can't invest a boatload of money. You can't handicap yourself. But if you can find, like this year, he was on 500 with up to 550 bonus. If you can get him to come back for the same sort of ballpark money, I think it's a no-brainer. Whether it's a combination of what he can provide and teach other players, what he can do for your locker room, the kind of leadership he has by example. Obviously, just the talent he has on the field. If you probably can't go in and expect 34 90-minute performances, but I think it's still a really good piece to have in your team.
100%. 500,000 is an absolute steal for his quality. That's less than Farfan. That's less than Ibiaga. That's less than Leggett, Pomacol. That's a quarter of Jesus. For the output, the number of games where he was the guy who ran the most on the team and kind of, on the ball, actually looked like he had a clue.
So is anybody else curious how Dallas got a guy of that quality on such cheap dollars?
I don't know. Obviously,
I mean,
somebody brought them to him, I would assume.
Doesn't that seem insanely low for a guy? I mean, I get it that he's 30. He was 33 when he did the deal.
Yeah. Well, he's not a particularly superstar famous.
No,
it's not like he's Xavi or something. But
Buzz, that's half what Paxton's making, or almost half.
I figured he must have known Nico Estevez or somebody he knew Nico Estevez, and I figure probably he was when a guy's 33, 34. That's a high risk signing, as we knew, and we all talked about. And probably they were like, "Well, we'd love to have you, but we can only afford X, Y, or Z." So he may want a little more money this year. It's entirely possible. And there's a point at which, of course, you have to say no. You can't break your salary cap, particularly when you're already under the gun.
Well, no, that's kind of the point of where I am asking the question, because I'm going to assume, based on his performances, he's going to hold Dan Hunt's feet to the fire on a new contract and for a lot more money, especially if Eugene Ansah is making $200,000-$300,000 more a year than he is, and barely playing. And then that's where I think it gets back to the thing that you guys just talked about. I would be shocked if he signed another $500,000 deal, and because I'm sure he could go find a $600,000 or $700,000 deal, $600,000 or $700,000 deal at another MLS club.
Well, the one thing I would say about that is he's been talking about how much he loves it here, and the club's even posting videos where he's saying that. I mean, he wouldn't have agreed to that or said that if he didn't think it was going to be something he wanted to have thrown back in his face in terms of negotiation. So I think that he probably did that stuff where he was talking about how great it is in Dallas and how much he loves it in Dallas because he wants to re-sign and is trying to get them to give him, because look at how old he is. He's going to be 35 in March, and we know this club is swinging back as they always are reactionary, so they're going to swing back to youth again because they went old and didn't work, and they swing back. So he's probably thinking that they're probably not going to offer him a deal at all. So it's hard to know without being in there involved. But
I think one thing to keep in mind with him is a player in that position a lot of times coming here is a lifestyle choice. You've just had that interview of Marco Royce talking about being able to go out grocery shopping and whatever else. For a guy who speaks English, he doesn't speak an absolute metric shit ton of it. So a city like Dallas, where 43% of people are Spanish first language, it is a pretty nice. That's a nice transition. So yeah, and here's the master plan we've got to hope for, right? He does a year with a year option, and then when time's right, he becomes assistant to his former coach, Mauricio Pochettino.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do you have a number line in the sand? Like if he came and said, "I want 750," do you say, "Yay, no"?
At his age, I wouldn't give him. I don't think I could give him 750. It would be close.
If he hits the DP threshold, then that might be difficult.
Yeah, okay. That's 744 going into next year.
All right.
Oh, it's gone up that much. Wow.
Yeah. I didn't make that number up. It was on their website. I guess because of the CBA, they've actually determined what some of those numbers are going to be: cap, TAM, GAM, DP, for the next 3 or 4 seasons, for the rest of the current CBA. So they're all on their website.
Well, let me just say this: for all the crap we've given Andre Zanata for some really shady and stupid deals, that one is a big giant gold star for his forehead because
Yeah.
somehow that worked out very well for him.
Well, probably as we talk about age a lot going forward, we should put out there that, of course, being a really good athlete and really fit helps you play longer. But so does, more importantly, like the kind of player you were. Like if you're a brainy player, you can usually play a lot longer than a guy who is just about athleticism, because your athleticism will fall off before your brainy soccer will. So, he's a smart guy that plays with his mind, so he'll be able to play a long time if he wants it.
All right. We're going to have to speed this up, or this is going to be a 4-hour podcast.
Right? You started with the big one. So.
I know. All right. Well, that was the one I think is probably is going to generate the most conversation. All right. Next up, the guy that they picked up to kind of fill in a spot and turned out to be not too bad, Huan. Now, he's out of deal, and he probably wants a lot of money, so I have a feeling he's not going to be here next year.
Yeah, I would love to keep him at the price he's at, $440,000. That's 70,000 more than Tumasi for a lot more output. But yeah, he's 29, turns 30 early next season. This is kind of his last good contract opportunity, right? So that's when you want to make your money, which isn't really going to be a thing at FC Dallas.
What was Hollingshead making?
Originally less than that, and it got better.
That's what what is he making at LA? Do we know? Do we remember?
I know when he left Dallas, it was kind of in that same ballpark. It was like 475 or something.
Okay. All right.
Well, for me, I would agree with Dan that there is a number at which I would want to keep him, but I don't think it's actually going to happen. Because as Dan points out quite right, Hollingshead is on 645, by the way. The bigger problem actually is Giovanni Jesus, who's sitting there on a U22 deal, and that's the guy that the theory behind the U22 deals is that you paid a fair chunk to get them, and they get paid a little less and they have a low cap hit because they're supposed to be developed for sale or developed to become a key part of your team. So they paid some money to get him. They're going to want to develop in that guy. They're going to invest in that guy. So I think Juan fell into that category of short-term emergency signings of Luxon saying, I need a wing back. You guys are killing me. Give me a wing back. And so they did. And remember that trade cost them almost nothing. So, if Juan comes into the office at the end of the season and says, yeah, I'll stick around for 400, then I'd be like, awesome. That's great. But I think Dan's right. He's going to want more than that. And so I don't think it's in the cards. I think that it'll be, between what is theoretically a recovering Jesus and the other possibilities you have. And right back is also a position where you have guys in the academy come through too. Obviously before this, Brian Reynolds and Reggie Cannon are really good examples of that. There will be more of those. That's a position Dallas can produce easily.
Okay. So we're just saying we'd keep him at the right price is the general consensus.
Yeah, it would have to be a pretty low price, and we both find that price to be pretty unrealistic, and so we're assuming that he will not be here next year, I think.
Yeah. Well, okay. All right, last person out of contract is the old man himself, Jimmy Maurer.
Jimmy just completed his UEFA front office training course, and you remember a year ago even he was already doing that kind of work, and his current contract is actually one that's partially front office work as well as play. So I think it's time to let Jimmy retire and move on to whatever's next. Hopefully it's obvious, or not obviously, but perhaps, or hopefully it's going to be something inside the organization along those lines. And he's a guy who probably would keep himself relatively fit, I imagine. So God forbid you really needed him, you could always go grab him for emergency or whatever. But I think it's time for him to ride off into the sunset.
100%.
Okay. Salute, Jimmy Maurer. All right, the last one that isn't is a buy option, which is different than options. How, Buzz?
Well, he's on a loan, so you'd have to pay the club he's currently under contract with to get him. So the fee could be anywhere from almost nothing to $10 million for all you know. That's obviously a big mystery point. So Dan, go ahead on Delgado if you want.
For me, it's really if the price is right. His salary this year was $150,000. You can't complain about that for what he did in the team. But yeah, that buy price could be horrific, like we've seen with some other South American loan to buy options. It could be totally amenable and make it worthwhile.
I'm actually going to say, unless the price is crazy low, I'm going to say pass. Because he plays a position where you already have Velasco and Jesus Ferreira and Paxton and Leggett and Paul Areola and Thomas Pondeka, and then 4 or 5 more kids that are coming through the academy. You have Pedrinho, who's a phenomenally talented player at North Texas, who I think has a good shot to be on the first team next year, from Brazil. So I just think that like his real position is that high 10 position, remember? And that's a position where Dallas has a lot of stuff already and a lot of salary already. And maybe it's a spot they need to dump some salary, but I just don't think there's a avenue for all that much PT with him in that spot, unless of course he's just so cheap it's crazy not to get him, and that's sometimes with these buys it's hard to know. So I'm going to say pass.
All right, well that takes us to the list of players that have options. And speaking of right back, Ima Tuamasi tops the list. Buzz, drop or keep?
Unfortunately, I think it's probably going to be drop. Tuamasi is now 27. Prime of career. In the last 2 seasons, he struggled a little bit to stay healthy. And again, this comes down to the idea that they've invested a bunch of money in Giovanni Jesus in order for him to be here. If they're going to try and keep Ruan, then again, that squeezes them out. You also have Herbert Endele. And again, that's a position where you have guys in the academy that are going to come through over the next several years. So I think that at some point, like he's one of the longest serving players here. I think he's the only people that have been here longer are Paxton and Jesus. So he's had a hell of a run, and he's a good enough player that somebody else will pick him up either in MLS or USL Championship. But I think probably consider too, like as his salary accelerates, he's going to jump up to something around the neck of 420,000 next year, which is Juan ballpark. So that's a lot to carry again.
Yeah, I think the escalator on his options probably going to be a little bit prohibitive for the production he has. So good time for him to get a fresh start, a fresh approach, and maybe he can get some of that side of his game, the attacking side of his game back that lacked a little bit towards the end.
All right, this will be an interesting one. Sebastian Ibiaga, dump or keep, Dan?
I actually wrote keep, and I don't really know. Oh, I wrote keep if you can. I wrote keep if you can restructure his deal. Don't go into his 2 option years. That's not going to be worth it. He's 620,000 right now. Try and get him down. Get him on a centre back 3 sort of friendly deal. And yeah, I mean he's productive.
Yeah, Dan's right about his salary. It should jump to 720 base with like a 783 high end, which means that you have to use some TAM GAM on him to buy him down a little bit to keep him under the DP threshold. So like the fact that they're paying him like he's a DP shows you how much they value him. At the same time, he's also going to be 33 in January. Now he's been relatively fit. He hasn't got hurt very much. Maybe some minor ones here and there, but I think my hope is in terms of roster building that he's not a deadlock starter next year. And so that's way too much money for a deadlock starter to be at a DP level contract. So it's just, I agree with Dan. The trouble is like, you don't necessarily want to let him walk because in the open market, somebody will probably give him more than you want to give him. So like you need to really quickly right now offer him something less than that, but maybe like for 3 years, so that it would get him to like he's 35. But admittedly, he has been pretty fit. You can't complain about that part. But I think it's like any of these contracts that start to escalate into DP range. You just can't keep picking those guys up indefinitely. So I think he probably is going to be a casualty. On the other hand, if I'm saying let him go, I don't know that Dallas would, because they really do value him, and it may depend on the coach that they end up hiring, but it won't shock me at all if they do pick him up, even though I don't think they should.
Wow. All right.
That's a lot of money, man, for a center back that's 33.
He is in my mind, all due respect, he is a bench center back at best, and anywhere near DP money just seems insane to me, but
yeah,
I'm just a guy with a radio show. All right, Nkosi Tafari. He actually has options, Buzz. What's the situation with dump or keep Nkosi Tafari?
Keep for sure, because his value is actually really good contract-wise. The last 2 years, last 3 years, he's gone from like 190 to 240 to 370. So the math is his contract, if in the option, is probably going to be around 440, 450. So that's basically like where Tuamasi was. That's where Juan was. That's not where Ibiaga is. So for a starting grade, we all think center back, that's a good number. He is going on. He'll be 28 in March, which is prime career. He's going to be at his very best for the next 3, 4, 5 seasons. He's a pretty fit guy. He takes care of himself. So I think that's a no-brainer pickup for me.
I think you go a step further and you get him on a new deal in the winter. You put him on that deal that takes him past 30. Maybe it's not been the best year for him. His value is probably a little bit lower on the contract, where you could get a little bit more of a friendly number. If you let him have a monster season on an option year, you're going to be paying close to DP money.
Yeah, if you give him a 5-year deal, that would be till he's 32, like a 3+2. I mean, that would be a really smart move on their part if they could lock him down for not DP money and like lock him down just maybe a little bit more than he might be next year at 440.
All right, I'm just going to say it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what the club knows that we don't know about Nkosi Tafari, because there was 2 managers straight that kind of ran wrong side of him. And for a club that was absolutely devoid of center backs, the fact that he sat on the bench for the most part for the final part of the season with no explanation just raises all kind of red flags with me, because it's not like he's a bad player. I just want to know why the coaches decided he didn't need to be out on the field when they absolutely needed center backs. And there's got to be more to this story than we know.
Yeah, coach talked about him not being consistent this year, that he was too up and down, too hot and cold.
See, when I hear a coach say that tells me there's something else going on. Off the field, in a personal life, he's got something going on, or he's gotten sideways with another manager or something. There's something else with the Tafari deal, and I can't put my finger on it.
Well, he has a strong personality, and sometimes some coaches don't like to deal with that. I could go ahead, Dan.
As I say, Lucci and Nico both kind of had an issue where they didn't feel he fully bought into the tactical side of the game. So, I mean, that can be pretty frustrating, right? Especially if you're a team that's hemorrhaging goals, that one of your centre-backs is just like, yeah, I'm just going to do my thing.
Yeah, and by the way, I said 2. It's actually 3 managers in a row that got sideways with Tafari.
I feel like sideways is a little strong, but I think that like they have not valued him as much as we do, and sure.
I'm saying sideways because this is a club that desperately needs starting center backs, and he's not playing. If that's not sideways, I don't know what you call it, but
he's not been banished from the team or anything. He just didn't get picked for the start. That's all. I mean,
it feels like the old fashioned Pappy doghouse.
Yeah, it could be. But, those coaches are all gone. So maybe they should have invested in the guy. I think this is another guy that I think a lot's going to depend on the coach, because it depends on what kind of defender you like as a coach. He does play very aggressive. I think when he's mentally aggressive, I think he's better, but he has to also contain himself. He can't be overly aggressive. That's a thin line to walk on his part, Nkosi's part. And I actually feel like if he had a guy next to him with a bunch of experience that could, sort of help direct the entire defense as a collective, because right now I think the defense looks to him a lot. Like Ibiaga is a steady guy, but he's not a leader of back lines in the sense of like he's always just been a journeyman. Now his salary says he should be the leader of the back line, but I don't see him out there necessarily coordinating traffic. And that might go a long way to helping both him and Tafari both if there was a guy back there like that.
Okay. I think this one will be easy. Dante Seeley. Drop or keep. Yeah,
that's a dump. It's time. He needs to find himself and rebuild his game. It's over here, I think. But just for argument's sake, his salary next year will be roughly $300K, which is a lot for a dude that's probably not going to play. It just isn't enough there.
Okay. Antonio Carrera.
Whose turn is it? Is it Damien or Dan?
Whoever.
Should be yours. But I mean, I'm keeping him. I'm promoting him to number 2.
Yeah, it's time to put up or shut up from Antonio in the sense of like that they did the loan deal that didn't quite go how they wanted it to, but it was still a good thing for him. And come back, and now it's time to be the number 2 clearly. And obviously, if you get to camp and he's not, then you can make some sort of adjustment. But he should be ready. I mean, this is a guy that was has started U20 national team games and he was the number 2 choice, but he did get some starts at that level, and he did some really great things when he's played for FCD. So he should be ready to be the number 2.
And if you thought you dropped Dante Seeley like a hot potato, next up, Eugene Ansa. Drop or keep?
Okay, so I did the math. He cost $1,232 per minute played. His one goal came at a cost of $600,000. Fuck him off.
Yeah, well, obviously, like his salary next year will escalate to where it's actually a DP number. You'll have to buy him down just a tiny little bit with Tam Gam. Obviously, the amount of minutes he plays and goals he gets at that number is just insane. There's no way. And he's also 30 in December. He'll be 30. So it's, thanks, dude. That's a good way to. It's not going to solve your cap problems, because when you cut a salary, you do have to replace that salary, but it's still going to be a good whatever body they put in there, which will probably be Tarek Scott, frankly, who's going to be a player that costs you nothing. You're saving anywhere from, like, depending on who your literal replacement is, $500 to $700K on your cap, which is a nice chunk. So that's a step in the right direction and a no-brainer.
Okay.
Gone.
Adios, Mr. Ansa.
Yep.
Sam Junka, I think that's a no-brainer. You got to keep that guy, right?
Yeah, and that's a no-brainer keep. Good value salary, prime of his career, fantastic guy in the locker room, works his tail off until Juan got here and Sam played less under Luxon. He was like a guy that, even though he was only a part-time starter, had run the most on the team. So he's still top 4 or 5 in terms of distance covered and work put in. Can play both sides, can play wing back, outside back, even play wing, can cross. Best crosser on the team, probably.
He was Hollingshead 2.0.
Yeah, he really is. Now they obviously, for some reason, they like Marco Farfan better in a lot of ways, but honestly, the guy's fantastic price and a piece for a team. There's a no-brainer at all to keep that guy for sure.
Yeah, I think, he's turning 28 in less than a month.
Yep.
He's got the option for next year. I think you exercise that option, and he's one of those guys that gives you that luxury that after the winter window, you can see where you're at, what needs you still have, and what space you have money-wise, and you can kind of dictate his next contract there rather than get to the end of the option and he's a free agent and he's like, I'm not a $200,000 a year player. Thank you very much. I will try something else.
And most importantly, he's from Saratoga, California, which is where I lived when I was a kid. So bring him
I
back.
did not know that.
I think it's important that he has the same number of vowels in his last names as he does consonants. So
Yeah.
that's cool. Next up on the list, Liam the Canadian Fraser. Dump or
Not the
keep?
Canadian Destroyer. Ride the option for him. 200 grand, 26. You're hoping he kind of bounces back from the injury pretty well. Seems pretty solid.
Dump for me. I think Show is better. So I'm keeping Show and dumping Liam Fraser. I don't think he's good enough. I think he's too one-dimensional and his passing's not good enough.
Would you guys like to fight about that a little more?
No, because it's a small player at the bottom of the roster. It's not that important. And Dan's right. He is relatively cheap. I mean, if they kept him, it wouldn't be a big deal. But, honestly, any minutes he got should go to Nolan Norris. So,
Fair.
For me, it's a dump.
All right, this one's easy. We're keeping the Beeve, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Look, this is one of the best, first season draft picks they've ever had. I mean, honestly,
maybe the best ever.
It might be the best rookie season ever. Honestly, it is phenomenal. A rookie season. It's so good, in fact, that that guy will heavily impact like any offseason plans you're making that we'll get into at a much later date. Unfortunately, he kind of got hosed in the sense that college players these days don't get rewarded with good contracts. Even if you're a high pick, you get negotiated the exact same deal. It's a 1+1+1+1, which stinks because he's going to get jack squat money for like 4 years with those options. At some point, if he does it again, like next year, Dallas will need to really rapidly start thinking about how they're going to lock that guy up more long-term because he's fantastic.
Yeah, I wrote, fuck the options, throw a deal at him now. Obviously, as a technical director, you don't want to do that because a guy that cost you $71,401 this year for 6 goals and 5 assists 1,500 minutes is a really, really nice luxury compared to Eugene Ansah.
Yeah, he's in the part of the roster that doesn't count on the cap. So like next year he'll probably be looking at 80 something because that bottom minimum number will go up. But that's a guy that like long term, as he becomes a more valuable player and even like a for sure starter, you'll need to pay him appropriately. You don't have to do it yet though.
He's probably got like a side job he's doing or something. Make a little.
Come on, $80K? No, he doesn't need a fucking side job for that.
I don't know. He's a Gen Z, Buzz. They're Malik Henry Scott next on the list. Dump or keep?
Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say exercise is option. I mean, he's got 3 of them.
Yeah, option. He's a guy that came out of college. He's been in North Texas all year. Showed a little bit. It's worth keeping around for another year at least.
Okay. Oh, no. Buzz. Oh, Buzz.
Yeah.
Steel yourself, Buzz. Isaiah Parker. Yep. Dump or keep?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. If you want to be a good person, you dump the guy because he deserves a chance somewhere where they're going to believe in him. But the coach is going to change here. Here's the thing, though. I don't know that it pays to be a nice guy. Like sometimes you have to be ruthless. And while he has not gotten through here and done much at all to speak of course, he was having a pretty good season with North Texas, and he's cap free, right? He's a generation Adidas player, so no salary cap hit.
Still,
that means this next season will be his 4th season, and you get protection as long as you would have been in college. So he came out of college basically after his fall freshman year.
But here's the thing, Buzz. This is his 4th year. How many actual FC Dallas minutes has he actually played in all that time?
None.
Okay, so why would you keep him?
Because he's 22.
But he's not even been good enough to play in a single game in 3 seasons.
Well, the coach that was here hated him. So you actually don't know if he's not any good or not. So like he's younger than Farrington.
All right, you've watched him.
And
do you think he's MLS good?
I think he's got potential to be MLS good. And he's a lefty, which is hard to find. And he can play back or wing. He has deficiencies in his game, there's no question. But he was good enough that like when he got signed as a freshman to a Generation Adidas contract, people at the time were talking about how he was going to be in the national team within a couple of years. I'm not saying he hasn't lived up to that for sure. He is not. Right. But that doesn't mean you shit can the guy after 2 seasons that I'm blown knee. I'm just saying that based on the original potential, based on the fact that there's going to be a new coach here, it could be Luxon, it could be somebody completely fresh, and based on the fact that he's going to be cap protected for another season, I think it's not necessarily a horrible idea to keep him. So I would not, as a human being, I would let him go because the kid needs a new start. There's also the possibility you might not be able to cut him and let him go because he's on a medical. You can't just dump a guy on a medical. You have to work that out, right? So you probably can work it out if you want to get rid of him. I'm just not necessarily suggesting that you should, even though just because of the left side value and the roster protection value all alone by themselves.
All right.
But you're right. He has a long way to go, and he's not lived up to his hype at all.
You know what? I'd like to see him play soccer for once.
Well, right. Like right now would be his senior season of college. Wow. Right. I mean, and you draft pick guys that are that age all the time. So
I think they also need to get out of that left back conversion because it's just not worked for him. It's like Tumasi. When he runs forward, he just turns around and runs back. He doesn't hold up the play. He doesn't look for teammates to come into it. He just kind of gets in his head and makes terrible decisions. Let him do what he was doing well in college and see if he can float there. At that price. Otherwise, he's a guy that was supplemental number 31. He wasn't even technically on the roster. 0 minutes, 0 benches. It's not really serving a purpose otherwise.
Yeah. And keep it, and even this year when they basically was non-existent because he was on that full-time loan basically, right? Well, he still played a whole boatload for North Texas. It's not the worst thing in the world to have a player like that, or maybe even somebody else will take a liking to him and then you could sell him or trade him. I'm just saying because, again, roster protection, right? Cap protection is big.
Next up, Herbie Endeley, dump or keep?
Keep, because he's actually had these moments of flashes where he does some good things, and he's going to be 23 this next season. And we just talked about how you might be getting Tuamasi gone, Juan might be gone. Is Areola going to be a right back? It might be Jesus and nothing. So you might need him as a cheap, still kind of guy with maybe a little upside. So I'll keep him. He doesn't cost anything.
Yeah, I mean, he's got 2 option years. I think you quite happily ride that and see how he progresses. He's, in his little moments, he's looked really promising. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily leave him at North Texas again. I think if he's not going to be your backup right back, if it's not like Giovanni Jesus and him, then it is a point where you might consider maybe cutting them guy, because you want to give the North Texas minutes to somebody who's like 18 or 19 years old and not 23. But like if you're going into next year and like you need a backup that you've seen MLS action in and cost you almost nothing, then that's a guy that could fill that role.
All right. Amet Korcha, dump or keep?
I don't know why they re-signed him in the first place. Just let him go find his level and play soccer.
They needed a body.
A body.
Yeah, but they didn't need a corpse.
No, fair. I mean, he went from 4 games last year with hardly any minutes to 0 games this year. So that just tells you what you need to know. He's also 24 next season. So.
Has he been playing for North Texas at all?
Yeah.
Oh.
He's 24 now.
Yeah, he's 24.
Is any good at North Texas?
He's fine. I think his minutes were mandated when he went down there. He's okay. He's decent. He gets hurt too, though. He's missed chunks of time there because he keeps getting hurt. It's just like all the combinations are bad. Just let him go play in the USL somewhere or something.
Siki and Sebling. I think we're going to have a debate about this one.
Whose turn is it?
I don't care.
All right, Dan, go ahead.
He has 1 option year. I let him use that option year and I make it a do or die. Like you play for a deal and you play for a good deal. If you don't succeed, sorry.
Absolutely 100% keep. He's on 100K. That's super cheap. That's the bottom part of the roster no one cares about. He plays a position that teams pay millions and millions of dollars at. But that doesn't mean that like in roster positions 27 to 30, you can't keep a spot for that guy. He comes into the games sometimes and outplays people he replaced. He outplayed Alan Valesco by miles last game. He's super cheap. He works his tail off. He doesn't complain. He's well liked. That's an easy keep for me all day. If he's starting, you have a problem. But great roster piece.
Okay. And last but not least, I think there are people working at Chick-fil-A making more money than him. Omar Gonzalez, dump or keep?
That's a dump for me. He's going to be 37, 36. I offer him a coaching job in the academy. And I'll tell you why I do that, because the Dallas is not great at producing center backs. He's just about the most experienced U.S. national center back there is, short of Tim Ream. Really smart guy. I would keep him all day as a center back and the coach in the academy if he wants it.
I think you kind of keep him around in the periphery, and if I'm looking at this as a rebuild. I know there's a lot of difficulty to a rebuild. If you can't get all the pieces you need at that price, he is really nice as a number 4 centre back. Obviously, he's come into games, he's played decent minutes, and he's done fairly well for the most part as an experienced organizer in the defence. I will say, whenever I'm in the locker room, he is someone that everyone gravitates to. He is someone that Areola and legitimately look up to. I've heard Paul Areola say, like, when he does certain things, like if you ever watch him come off the bench, he does a full sprint to the back line. He doesn't jog on, he full sprints. Areola says, you do that fires me up, that makes me play better. That's a guy I want somewhere around the team.
Okay. Interesting stuff. Question about the players that are under contract. Is there anybody that are under contract that you would not be surprised that are not here next season, either through trade or some other reason?
Well, certainly a lot of them. You're talking about a club that missed the playoffs. And it's going to change coaches, and the owner's mandate, quote unquote, is make the playoffs. So, I already explained how, in my rough estimation, there are $1.2 million, $1.5 million over the cap. You're going to have to eat some of that some places. So some of those guys are going to be gone. If you want to talk about the ways they can get under just by a move or two, there are some of those names on that section that could make massive differences.
So the big dollar names on this list are obviously Velasco, Pomykal, Ferreira, Areola, Leggett, Velasco. I'm not going to count Musa because you're not going to trade Musa. You're not going to trade Pause. That's it. So those are 6 guys. In my mind, there are 6 guys that you may want to have a conversation about. Paxton, because of his knee injury, we have no idea. Like, I've heard nothing about Paxton's progress, and that doesn't mean that it's good or bad. I just haven't heard anything one way or the other.
Yeah. Well, you absolutely 100% need to be considering the fact that you may need to buy out Paxton or do an injury settlement with Paxton, depending on how it goes. And we won't know the answer to that until, as we get close to the season, and or until they even tell us, or Paxton tells us, or tells not us, I mean the world.
Okay.
I think you're right. Like the way they explained, like when he was going to have that procedure, like they were feeling much more optimistic. Well, that sure didn't sound definitive to me, so I don't think anyone there is sure he's coming back necessarily. So 100% Paxton, you have to consider that.
Well, I know what procedure he had done, and it is not 100%. It's not a certainty. I mean, it is.
Right.
It could go one way or the other, and I obviously want it to go one particular way, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen that way.
Well, there are guys that have had that surgery and then played 5 or 6 more years. It's entirely possible that he will. It's also entirely possible that he won't. And so they have to plan for that contingency. So they may have to sit on their buyout, their one buyout. So sorry, we're jumping in there.
No, I was going to move on to the next name, but finish your thought.
So the next one up from my point of view is Paul Areola, who you can, has value. The reason he's such a killer for you is that right now Dallas has 4 DPs. He's a DP. He gets paid a pretty pricey. Where's he at? He's at 1.5 base, 1.7, and it hasn't changed. It's been the same. So we'll assume it's the same next year. So basically that means that you're paying $1 million in TAM and GAM in order to make him not be a DP. So it's not just that he costs you a full DP cap hit slot, it's that he also costs you $1 million. So unless you can one of your DPs and make him a full-time DP, that is a boatload of money to be playing for one player, period, let alone if that player has basically become a right back. And so what you have to ask yourself is Paul Areola a starter on this team on the front line, which is where you play players $2 million, right? Is he going to start in front of Musa, Jesus Ferreira, or Alan Velasco?
I think one thing you also have to consider is next year's the last year of his contract. He has an option year for 2026, but him, Ferreira, Leggett, Velasco, they're all getting to that point where you need to think about the future. You need to think about, are they going to be here at the end of 2025? Are they going to walk for nothing? Are you going to get some kind of value for them? Obviously, Velasco, that's not necessarily the discussion on, but he just happens to be in that grouping of 11 players whose contracts are up next year.
Yeah, remember too that Alan Velasco is a young DP, so next year's his last year, so he only costs you like $200,000 on your cap. That's different than a full senior DP. That hit.
Yeah, that's a good point. So maybe Velasco isn't part of this conversation, but Jesus Ferreira most certainly is. Yeah. And I guess there's a chance. I mean, I'm working under the assumption that Jesus wants to go to Europe. And I'm even working under the assumption that he may want to go to Europe so bad, he may pull the Paul Pogba news that we got today, that he's willing to reduce his salary to find a club that's willing to take him, to let him go somewhere else.
So there's a couple of clear differences between Areola and Jesus Ferreira. Areola, for example, does not have like a viable sale option to Europe. Maybe you could get somebody to take him and trade inside the league, but then they're going to have to want him as a DP or as $1 million buy down too. That's
San Diego.
Sure.
Send him home.
I mean, that would be great. But at the same time, the organization absolutely loves that guy. He's a phenomenal leader. He is their captain. He's a huge locker room presence and all that stuff. So the other difference between him and Jesus Ferreira having a viable potential sale to somebody else in Europe or whatever, you can convert up to $3 million of his sale price into TAM or GAM. So you could easily wipe out. because he's a homegrown, you get 100% up to $3 million. If I read it all correctly, when I read it like 3 days ago, so you can add $3 million on top of your TAM GAM you're going to go into the season with. So not only would he wipe out your cap, he would wipe out the cap and give you like another $2.5 million to play with that you didn't have before. So those two guys, Paul, Jesus, really more than anybody else, maybe Paxton in terms of a buyout. Those are your three most impactful ways, potentially likely ways that you would have to use one of those chips to get under the cap.
Wow. Think about this. There is a full potential that when we get to 2025, this is a team without Jesus Ferreira and Paxton Pomykal.
Yeah. Very possible.
I never even thought about that. That's crazy.
Those two guys have been here the longest.
I know.
Yeah.
But they're still south of 25.
Yeah, I know.
It's, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
The last name is Sebastian Lletget. In terms of, do we want to keep, we want to try to trade him?
He's just barely over the TAM GAM line. But again, that was one of those things that I called a luxury player, that he and Ariola really, for me, are that where like, if everyone's healthy, is he starting? Would he start over Paxton, for example? I mean, assuming Paxton's healthy, is he going to be in over Jesus or Allen? No, he's not.
Yeah.
So like, he's a luxury piece, and in a cap league, can you afford a TAM GAM? Now he's a very small TAM GAM buyout, but he's over that 744. So he'll be on the 800 base up to 900 max next year on the option. But he already took a buy down one time in terms of the salary when he redid his deal after 2022 going to 2023. He dropped from 900 down to 700, but now it's escalated back up. It's going to be 800, 900 again. So,
and that's it. Like, you can kind of look at averages to figure out what escalators may be, but he may have the sort that like Reggie Cannon did, that Pappy did, where if you don't act by this point, it's going to go up an absolute crap ton.
It might, yeah, you don't know.
Well, we've talked all season about this being a roster of dudes, and there is certainly a lot of dudes on this team, and we're going to talk a lot about this in the coming months as we get into the next season, how the Hunts and Zanata and whoever the manager ends up being go about planning this. How are they actively looking to take this beyond just another group of dudes, or are we going to find out that the stadium reconstruction and the reduction in attendance, the loss of revenue, and all the things that comes with that for the next 3 seasons is going to be directly reflected in another season of just a bunch of dudes?
Right. And then keep that in mind too. Like I already said, like something like 1.2, 1.5 million over the cap. You have to cut that just to get under the cap. Then you have to start to think about, what do I now do to get better? Because like that was not even to try and add anybody. That's just a whole steady.
Right.
Like
exactly.
if you want to go get a center back at like a TAM GAM kind of number, you have to now cut even more off of your cap in order to get that guy in. Right. Because the Dallas is already carrying like 32, 33 players on their senior roster, mostly because they have extra homegrowns. But they also added Juan and Show and Frazier and guys like that too. So it's like, there's two big chunks that have to happen. One is just to be compliant, and the other is how do we actually make this team better? And that is a difficult proposition when you're already up against the cap or over it, as the case may be. You may have to figure out, how in the hell am I going to get some money? How in the hell am I going to open up space? You may be looking at a massive amount of changes in order to make it all, to actually try and be better.
Well, they could also make a massive amount of changes and really start shooting for that 50% roster made up of, kids out of the academy thing. And
they might need to.
and say, you know what? Look, this is going to be a bad situation for 3 seasons. We're just going to do it this way. We're going to bite the bullet, and we're going to run this thing on bare bones for 3 seasons, and then we'll blow it out in 2028. You never know.
Yeah. Like if you just cut Ansa, cut Juan, cut Frazier, cut Yaramendi, that probably gets you to your number. That gets you cap compliant. And so you might be looking at next season as this team minus those 4 or 5 guys, and then some kids, and then you are cap compliant. I don't know if you're getting into the playoffs with that, but
No, you're not.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's like just getting the roster to a normal shape is not nearly the same as actually trying to do things. And I think they'll be more aggressive than that. I mean, I don't think that they'll go just kids and just dump everybody, but they're going to have to swing and make some really tough decisions in order to try and actually get better. And they got to make some hard calls.
Is there a podcast for LAFC or Inter Miami doing this exact same exercise at the end of their season?
You would think there would be.
I don't think there is, but
LAFC
that would
super
sound like,
aggressive.
Yeah, I know, but that's my point. Is that those two teams have rosters that are way more than a bunch of dudes, and you do begin to wonder how these are two teams playing in the exact same league under the same set of rules.
Well, somebody just today posted an article about how Miami got themselves set up to get Messi and make it all work. I haven't read it yet, but I saw it posted somewhere today. I've been wanting to go read it. To figure out what they did. And they had guys all take sub-value contracts in order to make it happen. Right.
To be fair, Miami did break the cap rules with the 5 DPs or whatever they had and were indeed a team of dudes.
I mean, think of it this way. Right now, Dallas has 7 DPs for next year.
And they're buying down 4 of them?
Yeah. Well, they're buying down. 4 of them are being bought down with Tam Gam. And then 3 of them are staying out there.
Wait, who are those 7? Who are those 7? Just run through.
Well, the actual DPs are Musa, Ferreira, and Velasco.
Okay, stop. Right, stop right there. Musa, Ferreira, and Velasco.
Those are the actual real DPs. And then the buy downs.
Well, no. You're not. Let me finish my exercise here.
Oh, I thought you asked me who they were, so I was going to name them
because
all for you.
I am, but I want to run through something first.
Sure.
Are those 3 quality DPs?
Well, Jesus wasn't this year, but he was before.
Okay. Velasco?
Musa for sure is. Velasco is probably underperforming in terms of being a DP, but remember, he's a young DP, so he costs you next to nothing.
All right. Who are the 4 others?
Paxton Pomacol, Paul Areola, Sebastian Leggett, Sebastian Ibiaga by only a tiny bit, but is one, and technically Eugene Ansa by just a tiny little bit.
What a terrible.
So,
who was the person making these decisions? Who is doing this to this team?
Zanata. Yeah. But, again, almost half of those guys are out of contract or on options. You can dump them. So it's like, it is flexible. But
neat. All right.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Now, technically, Ansa and Ibiaga and Leggett all weren't last year, but their accelerating contracts should make them. This is next year I'm talking about, the 7 DPs. And that's not unheard of for Dallas. They've done that before. They've had, 4 or 5 guys that are over the DP line just barely. They love that shit. They do that all the time.
All right. So the final game of the season is decision day, home against Sporting Kansas City. Somebody tweeted you and I earlier today, Buzz, this question. I hadn't even thought about it till they brought it up at One Added Minute. Asked the question if, in fact, this would be the last time this weekend that we will see Dallas play in this stadium as we know it. And I think that's correct. If the plans go as stated, the next time you're in that stadium, it will look different because things will start coming down.
Yeah. Well, what do we say they're going to tear? Is it the east side that's coming down first? If I remember that right.
Yeah.
And we're all sitting on the west side next year.
People who are going,
we're on the west anyway.
Yeah, the east, whatever's coming down is which is the east side is coming down, and part of it will be down, at least some of it, if not all of it, by the time the next season starts.
I would imagine that, not instantaneously, because they've already said that if North Texas Soccer Club gets to the final, that they'll play the final at Toyota Stadium, and then they have bowl games.
Well, I meant if you're going as a Dallas fan.
No. I'm just talking. I was trying to calculate when they would start knocking things down.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
If they
January, February.
There you go. Because I was going to say they have bowl games too. They got to get through.
Okay.
So,
and this may be the last weekend you see Jesus Ferreira in a Dallas jersey.
Or Paul Areola or Leggett or Paxton
or Paz.
Ansa.
I think those are already on sale in the pro shop if you want to get a 80% off Eugene Ansa.
Delgado. Jimmy Maurer,
Lots and lots of it.
Omar.
There were a few names there that you won't see in an FC Dallas jersey. Maybe a warm-up top.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to other topics at hand. Trinity FC played last night. Dallas Trinity played on the road at DC to Donuts. Anybody watch the game?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah. The quote, the coach after the game had a funny quote about looking forward to go home. She had no idea how hard life on the road was going to be. I was like, yeah, you think? No. They've had 3 straight road games. You know, they were having a little, the funny thing is like I think they have a little trouble scoring, but they're like the highest scoring team in the league, which is funny because they had that blowout game where they scored 6 goals. But other than that one game, they've had a little trouble scoring. They're really getting hurt by injuries. Broussard, the other starting winger, has been a big miss, not having her around. One of their starting center backs is out. That's been a big hurt. You know, they occasionally get in trouble with pace out of the back. Most teams have decided that because it looks like that because the Trinity midfield is really good with Brooks, Meza, and Danielson, that the best idea against Trinity is to overload the midfield and then just make the Trinity back 4 pass out, and that's, you know, to covered players, and that's really difficult. And so they've struggled with getting, you know, like FC Dallas, the build out has not been awesome, but they are generally speaking, you know, back to front, mostly better than teams they've played, except for Brooklyn. Except they have trouble finishing, and you know, and Broussard's missing is a problem, and maybe just they haven't quite figured out up front. You know, they don't have a Petter Musa, so they don't have somebody banging in goals at a high rate.
Yeah.
But you know, a road point is a road point. You know, that was their first clean sheet of the year, so their next home game is going to be a good chance to get some points. So
when is the next game? This weekend?
I think it's next Wednesday. I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's at the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah. Let me before you run off, let me double check when that is, that game.
It's the
25th.
25th against.
Yeah, next Friday. My bad.
Next Friday. Okay.
Yeah.
Is the state fair still going on?
Till the 20th.
Oh, so it's after the state fair. Okay.
Yeah.
They were at one point they were going to have a friendly on the 19th, but then that fell through.
Okay. And North Texas plays their playoff game on Sunday, Buzzard.
Yep. Sunday. Yep. And that'll be fun because they picked that Vancouver team, which is reeling and cratering and had a really horrible back end of their season. So, you know, give that team a shot. They're in the playoffs. They're pretty good. There's probably 3 guys on that team that'll be with FC Dallas next season, I think.
What time's the game?
Oh gosh,
2:00.
Oh, there you go.
No,
really?
it's not. No, sorry, that's St. Louis. 7:30.
No, I was gonna say 2:00 would have surprised me.
Sorry, Barachos have an under the lights game Sunday night. Sorry.
Oh, that's a huge game.
Well,
it is.
It is for me.
That's what I'm saying. It's huge.
Okay. Well, I think we did it.
I have one local shout out for you.
Oh,
Zoe Matthews. She's 17 years old from Southlake. She used to play.
Would she win on this episode of Third Degree of the podcast?
Well, she won a signed contract with the Houston Dash. She's a Jamaican U.S. Youth International. She signed with the Dash about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. So she's 17 from Southlake. Zoe Matthew.
All right. Congratulations to Zoe.
Yeah, congrats, sir.
What do you think Zoe's making now on that contract?
Oh, I mean, I have no idea. I think the NWSL might be even more tight-lipped about things like that than MLS is, which is crazy. But
okay, well, I think we did it. Congratulations, boys!
Yeah.
Another episode of Dump or Keep.
I think we've teed up, you know, the starting points of conversations about like now, what do you do to get compliant? What do you do to start building a team and make it better? We'll have a bunch of ideas on that. I assume you guys will too. After the final game, you know, over the next couple of weeks, we'll start talking about that thing, and hopefully soon enough we'll get a coach announcement. So I don't think there's a coach call announcement yet. You know, we have one more game to play, so we'll see. And just to remind everybody, we're not going to throw any names out there, but we have heard of other people interviewing other than Peter Luxon. So it seems like it's open, even though we think Peter's still a very viable candidate.
Yeah, I think he's the leading. I think he's going to get it.
I think he's probably got the best odds, but you know, it's definitely not a lock. If they're interviewing other people, it ain't a lock.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess we'll find out in due time.
Yeah.
Dan, you got anything else you want to throw in here?
No, sir.
All right. Well, it was good talking to you, dude.
Likewise.
And would you like to tell everybody your OnlyFans page address?
I don't even know how they would be formatted to even make a joke about that, unfortunately. I will say, in the middle of this, when we were talking about Alan Velasco and Buzz, and he's got a year left as a young DP. I quickly Googled young DP, exactly that phrase, not thinking to add the context of MLS, because I was like, that used to be that used to age out at 21. What's going on there? And sure enough, my Google history now has like a ton of.
You're on a.
Do you want to look at Pornhub? No, I don't.
You're on an FBI watch list, is what you're on now, sir.
I mean, I am anyway because I'm a green card holder. This just adds to it.
You're not a citizen?
No.
I thought you were a citizen. Yeah, young DP is through the season year 23, basically. So this will be his last season as a young DP, Alan.
Excellent.
I think it's fair to question that you brought up, Peter, like the idea of like, is he impactful? That's a legit question. It's like there definitely needs to be a point soon-ish where Alan's talent starts winning games and starts showing up on the score sheet.
That's a novel idea for a DP.
That part's difficult with his recovery because you don't expect him to be himself even next season. So then you're stuck, like, you speculate beyond the end of his regular contract. Do you kind of go into his options? What standard do you hold him to? Because he's obviously not going to be peak Alan Velasco.
Yeah, that's true.
By the way, I don't know if you guys saw Pablo Maurer posted a bunch of graphics related to original MLS design.
Yeah.
Did you see I had not seen these in a really long time. Did you see the Dallas ones when the Fury was a name and they used the Fury name but with the burn iconography? So where there used to be a D, now was an F.
They obviously had developed that enough got to that point. I mean, that was because the other ones he posted were the ones that got used for Metro and for the Galaxy, and obviously those are literally the ones that got used for FC Dallas Burn.
Yeah, the Mutiny was in there. Yeah,
crazy,
there was some little changes in a few of those things, but that was fascinating to see.
Yeah,
that was really cool. So I know.
I only saw the Chicago Rhythm one. I'm really excited now, which looked like the purple Globo Gym Cobras from Dodgeball.
It was interesting to me that they had the Chicago develop that much because you guys know, Peter, you know this for sure.
Yeah,
that Dallas got a team because Chicago couldn't work out their stadium situation at Soldier Field. Like that's why Dallas got a team instead of Chicago in '96.
I just wish I knew the timeline between, like, how compact was the timeline between Dallas Doom, Dallas Fury to Dallas Burn, or what the order was, and
we should remind people of the Dallas Doom story that we know about. That was an idea because one of the early documents that they sent around for the Burn, that was like, I don't remember what it was, some sheet about the colors or the logos or something. The file name, like printed in the corner of the thing, was doom.doc or whatever. And that's how we know that was up for.
I'm not sure how I feel about the Pegasus wing on Islamico. That makes total sense, but it looks weird.
Yeah, it's an interesting set of drawings. I mean, I know I had seen those before, but not in a really, really long time. And it was kind of cool to see Pablo bring that up.
And also the LA Galaxy, on the LA Galaxy and Tampa Bay Mutiny page, is that Earthworm Jim at the bottom left?
That is a spinning galaxy.
That is Earthworm fucking Jim.
Yeah, so there was an alternate Galaxy logo they didn't use very much of. In fact, it ended up being kind of the basis of what their mascot at the time looked like. And yeah, it does have an Earthworm Jim vibe to it for sure, Dan. You're right. But that was the alternative Galaxy logo at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nike gave everybody essentially a primary logo and a secondary logo. So Dallas was the vomiting Pegasus horse, and then the second one was the full head shot with the wings coming out of either side.
Yeah. Which you can get at the Third Degree t-shirt shop.
Right.
That's true.
Exactly. So
colorized.
Those were the days. Like I said,
The burn one uses the black and white one.
Somebody's going to end up writing an official dissertation on the story of the creation of all those things, because one of the best parts of all that is that back in 1996, all of that stuff, even the DC United logo, was largely ridiculed and laughed at and made fun of. But in 2024, most of that stuff is beloved and romanticized, and it's just everybody thinks it's the coolest shit ever. And it's so funny that I got to witness both extremes of that reaction to that stuff.
Because of Kevin Payne, DC United was by far the best brand launch. Their logo needed work, but their brand launch in general just was phenomenal compared to everybody else's. And by the way, FC Dallas is now the oldest logo in the league. It's the oldest untouched logo. Everybody else has altered their brand or logo.
Well, somebody in the Twitter thread reacted and said, "Man, Dallas should switch to the Burn branding." And even I can't believe I'm saying this publicly, and I may ask you to edit this out, but because the FC Dallas branding and that shield has now been around so much longer than the old Burn stuff.
Yeah.
And you and I, Buzz, both know that at the youth level, globally, that is a known icon and branding, and it would be stupid for them to change it now.
It would be. And I remember very distinctly when they did change that, a lot of people were poo-pooing how dumb it was. And I was like, dude, in 50 years, 100 years, that's a perfectly legitimate, fantastic brand. It's like, you only don't like it because it's not American at the time. Like, and we weren't used to FC this or that. It's very standard branding for a club, and I think it's perfectly fine. It's not, I think the logo's not awesome, but you're right. People know that brand, that name.
And I mean, people know that brand outside of this country. Like over in Europe, they know what it is.
Yeah. Mostly because of the academy, strangely.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, it's 95% because of the academy and very little to do with the actual MLS team, but more on that later. All right. Very good. Well, thanks again, Dan. Great talking to you, dude.
Likewise, buddy.
And Buzz, excellent stuff.
Thanks, man. It's awesome to talk soccer with you guys, as always.
And thank you, FC Dallas Curious fan. We will speak to you next week after the season is over on another episode of Third Degree, the podcast.
Go FC burning furiousnesses.
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
OnlyFans.com/bushybeard.
Oh, weird.